Hello, true duelists. YGO Strats here with Yu-Gi-Oh! Single Card History, a series where I talk about some of the cards that have impacted Yu-Gi-Oh! Throughout the years, and some of the other ones that are named Pot of Generosity. Today's card, the best Blackwing monster not played in Blackwing. That's right, it's Gofu, the Vague Shadow. Gofu was first released in the Dark Illusion in 2016 in the Peasant Rarity, with 2 reprints to date. The first was as a super rare in the OTS Pack 4, and again in the Peasant Rarity in the 2017 Megatins. For time on the ban list, Gofu was first limited on the November 2017 ban list before being banned in the next format on the February 2018 ban list, where as of this video, it has stayed ever since. A level 5 Dark Attribute Wing Beast type tuner with 0 attack and 0 defense, its effect reads: cannot be normal summoned or set. Must first be special summoned from your hand while you control no monsters. When this card is special summoned from the hand, you can special summon 2 Vague Shadow tokens. Winged Beast type Dark level 1s with 0 attack and defense, but they cannot be tributed or used as Synchro material. You can banish this card and 1 or more face-up non-tuners you control, then target 1 Blackwing Synchro monster in your graveyard whose level equals the total levels of the banished monsters had on the field, special summon it, and if you do, it's treated as a tuner. Gofu is a Blackwing card in name, appearance, type, and attribute, but in terms of performance, not even remotely. I've played Blackwing on and off for years now, and at no point when this card was legal was it a card I really wanted in my Blackwing decks, or at least that was the case during Master Rule 3 Blackwings. It's almost great in them, being a free special summon turn 1, but the restrictions on the tokens to not be used for a Synchro summon makes me question what the purpose is to be used in Blackwings. For tribute fodder of Blackwing Abrolos the Megaquake? No, because you can't even use the tokens as tribute fodder either. So while it wasn't terrible as, say, a free level 5 tuner to be used with low level Blackwings like Harmattan for a level 7 Synchro or something, the fact of the matter was there were better Blackwing tuners and non-tuners to use to make their plays, and it's not like Blackwing has ever been hurting for cards to swarm to the field. No, instead this card saw play in a variety of other decks for a variety of reasons, making for an interesting history of a card before Master Rule 4 shook up the game and made this card go from neat tech, isn't it, to absolutely broken thanks to a single summoning mechanic. And sometimes they didn't even use the tokens it can summon either, so there's plenty to talk about. The first deck Gofu saw a home in was actually Metalfoes in 2016, randomly enough, but it makes sense once you think about it. Metalfoes' entire gimmick is destroying cards you control to set their spell and trap cards from the deck, but no Metalfoe card needs the destroyed card specifically to go to the graveyard or anything, so the tokens functioned as free fodder for the deck to make its plays. Opening 2 Metalfoe scales and Gofu meant you got to +2 for absolutely free without having to recover monsters or material through a pendulum summon. And even better, its body could still be used on the field as a tuner for any sort of Synchro summon. The Metalfoe monsters are varied in levels, but have a level 2 and a level 3, which with Gofu's level 5 gave the deck access to all sorts of Synchro tools to outboards or make its plays. My favorite play back in the day in 2016 was to make Ignister Prominence using it as a means to get rid of any sort of monster or card with the spin effect. But other generic Synchros were playable too. Scrap Dragon and Black Rose Dragon gave the deck a way to outboards, and Anti-Spell Fragrance especially, as that card is the nail in the coffin for pendulum decks. It's also worth noting that Gofu's level 5 tuner status gave the deck access to Psyframe Lord Omega to recycle Metalfoe's counter turn after turn, and overall gave the deck a serious boost in its plays, from enabling the scale effects for free and opening the Synchro toolbox. Hell, when comboed with a Metalfoe's Adamante, it could be used to make Ultimaya Tzolk'in, which was not a bad way for the deck to access Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon for an easy buff to the end boards, which is a solid card in Metalfoe, since their scales set their spell and trap from the deck onto the field. Yeah, the synergy Gofu offered Metalfoes was kind of insane, and it helped to make the deck a very competent threat in the meta. This would be the primary home of Gofu for quite some time, but it did find its way into other decks to serve other sorts of roles as well. In a deck that would abuse a number of cards that would end up limited or outright banned alongside Gofu, Dark Synchro was another deck that loved Gofu, and boy did it love Gofu. A free tuner on board is asking to be abused, and Dark Synchro would use Gofu to do just that, abuse. Unlike Metalfoes, the deck wouldn't use the tokens Gofu offered, only the monster itself, or at least from my understanding. Being level 5 meant it was a great level to be paired with Level Eater to make some Hyper Librarian without using the normal summon, after which the pluses were all but unstoppable, with a draw for every Synchro summon, and the deck often playing the maximum number of copies of draw cards, such as Allure of Darkness, Upstart Goblin, and even Into the Void in some builds. The entire deck was famously built with the express purpose of going first and hand looping the opponent more often than not, by making Trishula, Dragon of the Ice Barrier, and Psyframe Lord Omega to rip 2 cards from the opponent's hand, and even with both of those boss monsters limited at the time, the deck would use its immense draw power it had to get access to up to 3 copies of Different Dimension Reincarnation, which it would use to revive Omega and rip another card from the opponent's hand. In the ideal opening hand, a Dark Synchro player could rip all 5 cards of the opponent's hand, and could even special summon so many times in a turn that it was possible for the deck to take the Max C challenge and special 35 monsters over the course of the turn just to deck out anyone brave enough to use Max C against them. And all of it was greatly enabled with opening Gofu and making 1 free Synchro. It was a very neat deck to play and work with, and absolutely awful to be playing against. But that wasn't the only home of Gofu, because even some domain Monarch builds would play Gofu. Again, not using the tokens. Because while the tokens can't be tributed for a tribute summon, Gofu itself sure can, and wouldn't you know it, both Majesty's Fiend, Vanity's Fiend, and even Curaz are all 1 tribute monsters, and Gofu doesn't need to use your normal summon to get itself on the field. It wasn't a popular tech in domain block decks, from what I can find, but any card the deck could use to help set up the domain lock was good enough for some people to play it, and Gofu did help with that goal. Also, if you did open Curaz and Gofu specifically, I suppose you could pop both the tokens and use Curaz to get an extra 2 draws. Pretty sure that's legal, so I guess that is arguably worth mentioning. But by this point in the meta, a year had passed since Gofu's release, and if you weren't aware, the summer of 2017 introduced Link monsters, and suddenly a number of cards that had been okay to good became a problem, and by God was Gofu one of them, along with a decent number of his buddies played in the Dark Synchro deck as well, funny enough, because if there's one thing Link monsters taught us, it's that tokens can quickly become a problem. If Lynx could bring Scapegoat back into the meta, you can bet it kept Gofu in the limelight, because what was once a solid free tuner with niche use for its tokens had become a Link 3 monster by itself overnight. During the early stages, and the beginning of Master Rule 4, Gofu saw use in Trickstar decks or World Chalice decks, with the tokens being easy Link Spider material, and then Gofu and its spare token being solid material for, say, Proxy Dragon, giving you 2 Link arrows on the first turn of the duel without even using a normal summon. And as was the case in Metalfoes, its level 5 tuner status meant it gave decks access to the likes of Black Rose Dragon to help wipe boards before committing to plays. Even in Master Rule 4, didn't matter if Black Rose Dragon takes up the extra monster zone, because it leaves immediately anyways. And Gofu continued to enable that. I just like Black Rose, I felt like mentioning it. But where Gofu most notably took home until its eventual demise was in Spiral. Yes, Spiral, the tier 0 deck that took over the meta in late 2017 and early 2018. What had been a battle of the bad between Subterror and Spiral as 2 TCG exclusive archetypes, both were underwhelming to most players until the OCG gave a Link monster to each, or at least that's the case for Spiral. The Subterra Link was so bad for the deck I may just make a video talking about how terrible it is for it. It's literally unplayable in Subterra. It breaks the deck by existing. But that's not what we're talking about. The Spiral Link instead broke what had been a neat but underpowered combo deck into an endless Link engine that set up some of the worst boards players could face in 2017. With Spiral Quick Fix searching with each summon to fuel discards to summon more quick fixes before using them to make some generic rank 1s and link them off some more, the deck could put out some relentless turn 1 plays with a Link zone or 2, and Gofu was still providing the same easy 2 Link arrows it had from Trickstar decks, only in this deck they were being cranked to 11, with the endless searching coupling into Firewall Dragon plays to end on boards containing a tri-linked Trigate Wizard, Spiral Sleeper equipped with Last Resort, and if you can't comprehend what these names mean exactly, it was 2 free pops, an Omni Negate, and a whole lot of crackback on the next turn if you didn't kill him. This was where Gofu was being abused most when it was limited, and even after being put to 1, it did nothing to stop Spiral, and it just became a Saki 1-up that could seal a duel before it began if a player opened it, and otherwise, not enough. Limit was not enough. During this time, the deck had been hit enough to not be tier 0, but it was definitely still tier 1, and where the room had opened for other decks, familiar faces like Trickstar showed back up, still using Gofu and still making the same sorts of plays, but with some more solid generic Link 4 monsters like Borlo Dragon to end on. And just 3 months later, Gofu would be banned, like it should have been initially. A free Link 3 by itself is insane to have on a card, and that's at the bare minimum what Gofu was. Sure, the tokens had a Synchro and Tribute lock on them, but they were not designed with Master Rule 4 in mind, and that's what the lock needed most. These days, it's definitely a worthy card of being banned. While Crystron Halqifibrax has since been banned at the time I make this video, it is scary to imagine the sorts of play this card with Halq could have made in the same format, as that is a free Link 4 without your normal summon. And for reference, a free Link 4 without your normal summon was reason enough to limit Scapegoat at one point, and that was a card that could only get you a free Link 4 on the 3rd turn of the duel at the earliest. Shoutouts to Scapegoat's summoning lock. Overall, Gofu is probably the poster boy for cards broken by the Link mechanic, or at the very least one of them. What had been abusable as a free tuner in more than one tiered strategy during Master Rule 3, and was a staple in all decks that wanted free Link arrows during Master Rule 4, which, for context, was just about every single deck. It's a card I cannot see coming back into the game anytime soon, certainly not without an errata or something. But until such a time, this is a card that gives too much free advantage to be allowed to exist in the game, especially with the modern Link pool of generic nightmare monsters for some ridiculously easy Link climbing. And so, that's our look at Yu-Gi-Oh! Single card history, Gofu, the Vague Shadow. Stay tuned for our next video, and feel free to suggest some cards to review or what type of video you'd like to see. Don't forget to like, and as always, subscribe to YGO Strats, so you too can become a true duelist.